I was 16 at the time and had just finished my GCSEs. If you are American and don't know why GCSEs mean what they do, they are basically graduation exams unless you want to study for 2 more years. My circle of friends was pretty large, but there were only 3 of us where I lived. Me and 2 boys who were good friends of mine, let's call them Peter and Luke. In the larger group of friends, there were 10 of us, Peter, Luke, and a girl named Riley. Riley was really popular and a drama queen. She had thousands of ex-boyfriends and a lot of beef. I met Riley when I was 12 and we became friends through movies, music, and pop culture. This incident happened in July, and I think it was a Sunday. I remember my mom nagging me to go to bed and telling me it was a school night. So my day was normal, nothing special happened. Before I went to bed, I heard a rock being thrown at my window. I looked outside and saw Riley. I was really shocked because Riley did not live in my village. By the way, the time was around 22 ago. I sneaked down the stairs, ran out of the house, and asked her what she was doing. She told me this: "My mom is being a pain in the ass, so I got on the first bus I saw and here I am." She said, "It's on Snapchat." I told her to go to Peter or Luke's house. She said the 2 of us should sneak out at 3 a.m. and play. I was totally against it until she called Peter and Luke. After Riley said they were going to sneak out to the park at 2:30, I agreed to go with them if they would wait outside for me. We went to the park and stayed for an hour and a half, after which Riley was going to stay at Peter's house. I snuck back into the house and made the perfect plan. Everyone went up to bed and I waited for someone to pee in the bathroom. When my brother went upstairs to the bathroom, I rushed downstairs and yelled that I was desperate. But I stole the key and unlocked the back door for later use. I quietly put the key back in the lock and went back upstairs. I brushed my teeth and got ready for bed. I went back to my room and instead of changing into my pajamas, I changed into black jogger pants and a hoodie, etc. I packed a knife and pepper spray in my bag. You know why. Because it's dark at night and I don't want to get killed. I charged my cell phone and got a flashlight. I texted Riley and he sent me a picture of the 3 of them walking up to my house. I stood in front of the window until I saw them. They looked at me, and I looked at them. I tiptoed down the stairs and entered through the back door. I closed the door and grabbed my flashlight. I joined Riley, Peter, and Luke and walked to the park. When we got to the park, we climbed into the children's building. It was just a house with a slide and a roof. I went in the corner and we just ate and fooled around. We played tag. Everything was fun and harmless until there was only 30 minutes left. Luke pointed out that the lights were on in the lab building. We were a little creeped out, but ignored it. I recorded a video of the lights and uploaded it to TikTok. For the next 10 minutes, we did the TikTok dance. As we were renegading, laughing, I saw the door to the lab open. I wanted to scream, but I made a clown face. I crawled over to Luke, who was recording, and whispered to him to get down. When I said, "Oh," the lab door opened, his face turned pale and scared. We crawled up the stairs to the house where Riley and Peter were making out. "What the hell?" he said. Our group of friends disappeared. Riley was going to make a big deal out of cheating on Peter. I whispered sternly to them. The door to the lab just opened. They looked over to see a figure waving at us. We were both overcome with fear. Riley's breathing became ragged. We didn't know what to do, so we just stayed there and watched. The figure stopped waving and started toward us. The institute is about 75 yards the other way from the park. Riley tried to scream, but Peter covered her mouth. We all picked up our stuff and tried to run somewhere, but we were trapped in the park. There was a wall leading to a field at the edge of the park and a house next to it. So we ran to the wall and jumped over it, not knowing what would happen next. The figure was now clearly a man. Peter pointed to a row of houses and said we could run there. So we ran to the wall next to the houses and jumped over there. The man shouted, "You can run, but you can't hide." It was like something out of a horror movie. Luke stopped us and rushed us to the house. He quickly turned over a stone next to the door of the house and there was the key. He opened the door and let us all in. I whispered to him. He whispered back, "He's my grandpa." He locked the door and we hid under the stairs. What next? I didn't want to get into trouble. So we waited until 5:45 and we all snuck back outside. Riley, Peter, and Luke gave me a ride home. I snuck back into the house and locked the door. I got dressed and went to sleep, waking up 2 hours later to my mother screaming my name for breakfast. I told my mother I wasn't feeling well and took the day off to get some extra sleep. The man did nothing, so I didn't file anything with the police. My phone is about to run out of charge. So let me finish by saying that other than us telling our friends and such, nothing really happened after that. It was a time when I was going to visit my grandparents. It was in a small little village far away from the city. My grandparents were farmers, so they were far away to avoid people from invading their property. Well, of course, when I arrived, I hugged my grandparents, hugged me, kissed my cheek, and happy to see me. My parents left me with my grandparents for the whole month since they were going to a business trip. My grandma was making me a snack. I heard weird noises at the direction where an oddly looking forest, surrounded by trees, all of that. At first I shrugged it off, but I soon heard the same rumbling noises again, as if someone was walking around or like playing a prank. So I decided to take a little exploring. I was looking around the forest. I soon ran into another girl whose name was Mina. She also lived in the small valley. To be fair, we got along super well. We were chatting and all, we hit it off pretty well. But for some reason, we heard bushes brushing against each other. We turned around. We were horrified of what we saw, Nick. A talk, woman about 6'9" or 8'9" was towering over. Her skin was pale as she wore a white dress. She had black hair and her eyes represent darkness. There was no color but darkness as she had a weird smile. She pointed at Mina beside me as she repeated, "Poke, poke, pokey." It was odd. I didn't know what was happening at first. I thought the women was weird, but man, I regretted it. The tall lady retreated back to the forest as me and Mina ran back to our respected home. I explained everything to my grandparents. They were crying, which I found odd, but I explained to them. It pointed at Mina. They were shocked and had a worried expression. I heard my grandpa and called someone. It looked he was calling Mina's house. He had a sad expression. To be honest, it got me so confused since I didn't really understand anything. Soon my grandmother explained who was the tall lady's all the detail, explains fit her appearance. But the backstory disturbed me. The tall lady was named Mikako Urihara, who was a beautiful lady and famous for her singing talent. However, she was taken advantage and was raped. She was left to die alone in the forest. That was the same forest I explored. It said she was going around looking for those who dared to lay hands on her and make sure they lose the people who they care, including their own children. I was horrified by the story. My grandparents called my parents back to get me since they didn't want me to be the next target after Mina, but I didn't care. I was more worried about Mina the most, knowing I was helpless. I couldn't do anything well. I knew I didn't know her for long, but she was the first friend I ever made when I visited my grandparents' place. My grandma locked me in a dark room knowing I had phobia for dark places, but she stated it was for my own good since it was weird. Since the tall lady was targeting Mina. My grandmother left. She closed the door. I followed my grandmother's instructions. I locked the door myself, and not to open it to anyone. I had a small little lantern with me. It was a little if help, since it was a strong light, well, sorta. It was very cold in the small room, and at every one corner I was terrified. I decided to stay on the corner, keeping the lantern on the middle so I can see everything. Morning soon came while my parents officially arrived to pick me up. They hugged me and quickly took me into the car, fastly. It was sad. I could not visit my grandparents anymore. I had a phone call that Mina disappeared, never to be seen again, meaning the tall lady got her. Few years later, met Grandpa died from an unknown sickness. And few years later, when I lived alone in my apartment. I am now 30 years old, so I'm an adult now. I had a phone call from my grandmother who called to ask if I would visit her. I asked if she was sure, but I soon heard a nerve-wracking scream. It was from my grandmother with the following, "Poke, poke, pokey." It scared me, recalling where that came from. It looked like she picked my grandmother next. The line cut off as I crawled in the small corner trying to process, not knowing if I was going to be next or not. Night was falling and the sky was getting darker by the minute. I lay in bed waiting for sleep, but it never came. My mind began to wander and I indulged in various thoughts. My peace did not last long. This sound was not as small as it had been in the past. I made my way slowly and fearfully downstairs. Entering the room where the sound had come from, I found a painting that had once hung over the flames of the fireplace. The landscape, painted in a dusty frame, now lay on a tattered carpet. A rumbling ringtone shook me violently. I rushed to the mysterious phone, wondering who would be calling me in the middle of the night. Hello? Silence reigned for a moment before an answer came back. It's a beautiful day tonight, isn't it? Don't you think so? Who is calling? I questioned, although the answer was already given. It pains me to know that someone very close to me does not remember me. His words convinced me that my fear that the past had returned had come true. He said, I want to believe that you miss me. What is your reason for not leaving me alone? The answers I needed would never come from the watcher who reappeared. My love for you is too deep. It is unbearable not to have you as mine. I am not yours. I was never yours. As time passed, it became harder and harder to hide my anger. He said, I am deeply sorry, but no matter how hard I try to be free, death is at my hand and my eyes only see you. You. I can no longer bear to talk to the man who has haunted my dreams since before I was born. How was it possible that he had returned? His death was real. It was on the news the day after his execution. There was no chance of his crimes being released. Trying to calm my nerves, I went to the family room. Once inside, my eyes met those of another. Sitting in a black armchair was the man who had called me late at night. How did you get into the house? He remained silent, staring almost menacingly. He stared at me silently, almost menacingly, like a predator stalking its prey. What do you want from me? His gaze shifted from my presence to something beyond where I stood. I moved slightly away from him, and with that slight movement, his eyes turned to me again. Why are you here? I came back for you. How? Were you condemned to death? As I told you before, you cannot escape me. I was startled by a small noise behind me. I turned around only to see a small mouse running across the floor. I quickly looked back to where the watcher was sitting. My eyes frantically scanned the room for the missing figure, a hand wrapped tightly around my wrist. I turned around and the watcher was inches from my face. Still holding my wrist, he turned and left the room. I staggered to follow him. He opened the basement door, the cold air sending a chill down my spine. Go. I don't try to fight it, just listen. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight. He grabs a long rope from a nearby shelf and ties it tightly around my wrist. The only thing I know for sure is that I have to keep trying until I get away from him. 3 months later. It has been a while since he locked me up in the basement. All my initial attempts to free myself from him have failed. My will to escape faded and I made peace with my situation. I learned many things from my watcher. The main lesson was that he was right. I cannot escape him.